A part of me wants to title the piece, The Real Simon Hill Exposed, or better yet, Simon's Shame, as a continuation of last week's release on Sonia Massey. I hope the confusing title will be clarified for the audience by the end, and that YouTube's algorithm doesn't collate this in a Young Thug or Gunna playlist, though the comments that would result would be beyond hilarious if any appeared. I don't believe there are any words to describe how hip-hop has influenced and changed my life. Equally, there are no adjectives strong enough to say how crushing it was for me when I realized that my rap dreams would never come true. During those mid to late teenage years, when unbridled vigor jolts one to dive into anything with reckless abandon, and those early 20s when physical prowess makes one think they can live forever, I channeled every fiber of my being into being an elite MC. I say this without cringing, but I wanted to effect positive change on the lives of kids the same way Killer Priest's basic instructions made this young black man teetering between atheism and agnosticism, growing up in the Bible Belt, not feel so alone. I wanted to write records that would rivet, like Cannabis's Channel Zero, to show those nonconformist youths like me coming up in places surrounded by traditionalists that there were like-minded, inquisitive souls out there. I wanted to pen prose like Jedi Mind's Uncommon Valor that challenged the powerful by telling the stories of the unheard powerless, and thus make the next generation feel empowered. Of course, the advertised financial spoils of making it into the upper echelons of music enticed me, but I would have sufficed with being a professional C-lister on the underground. I was more motivated to be a rapper as a way of giving back to the culture, the genre that gave me guidance in the gray. While others might have cut tracks to get more fans, money, and attention, I really felt like each song I made was a gift or helping hand to people who didn't fit in like me. It was my circuitous thank you to the rappers who did the same for me. If you can't tell by the type of artists or songs I've mentioned, I've been interested in leftist and revolutionary politics since I was a jit, and those themes were reflected in my music. See All Falls Down, Foolish Game, and White Man's World. I was never a gangster rapper per se, but it would be impossible to rap as long as I did and make as many songs as a kid without aggressive bars about criminal acts, whether I didn't or did. If you know your history, many of the culturally prominent black gangs in America, the Gangsta Disciples, Black Disciples, P-Stones, Pyrus, as well as the ubiquitous Bloods and Crips, all spawned from the same branch of the civil rights tree as militant revolutionary organizations such as the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army, and George Jackson's Black Guerrilla Family. These black street crews formed for the same reason that these political groups did, to provide protection against bands of racist white hooligans harassing black communities, and as strength in numbers to be a bulwark against attacks by white supremacists who wear badges and tote state-sanctioned straps. There was so much overlap in the purpose of the early incarnations of the black street crews and the radical black vanguard that members oscillated between groups. Both sides of the coin collaborated to keep the peace and fight the beast, and lingo like Ride or Die from the Panthers would bleed into common street vernacular. Rap music is a style that was born out of the streets, but it has also remembered its black radical roots. Even though COINTELPRO was successful in stomping out the Panthers and others, it couldn't stop Public Enemy sampling Malcolm X or Farrakhan's speeches, nor could it halt Dead Prez from keeping Huey P's words alive. If you can comport yourself to understand what sounds improbable, my understanding of the machismo and bravado inherent in rapping about violence or guns was born more out of the school of thought of the BLA and less so NWA. So with that said, when I rapped that cops see me on the corner, think I sell something, put me in them cuffs, I won't tell nothing, one of only a handful of anti-snitching bars from me, it comes from the place of not cooperating with the state's armed thugs to suppress the people, rather than allegiance to the street code of ethical conduct. After reading the words of Bobby Seale, Huey P., and other works from the radical intelligentsia of that era, I reached the conclusion then that no black American man man should cooperate with or work for the police in any capacity, especially if it is to the detriment of another black person. The reason is that in the white supremacist anti-black criminal justice system as it stands, no black person can be guaranteed a fair shake in that system, and the likelihood that one will leave the court, the jail, the prison, the parole or probation office unscathed, even if found innocent, is nil. Therefore, if we cannot assure justice at the hands of people who historically and currently treat us unjustly, I cannot say I want for my brother as I want for myself while dialing 911 to call most likely armed white men who very much might execute this brother right in front of me. No matter what, I would never call the police, and I would sincerely persuade other black men not to either, because until the status quo is abolished, we are contributing to our own debasement by helping the devil put gods through hell. At least that's how I thought at 16. As we grow, enter, then exit phases in our development, our minds may change, principles may fade, or we betray morals we say we'd always obey. It's not that I didn't remember my hardline stance against alcohol consumption when I associated the bottle with Europeans beguiling natives to drink firewater until they were mollified, addicted, then expelled from their homelands when I learned this in my early teens. It's just that when I reached 20, it was easier not to be a hotep in a dorm room party trying to explain why being straight edge was an act of radical resistance. It's not that I didn't see the same logical fallacies in any religion's argument for God's existence that I confronted at 21 in my university's philosophy class. It was just easier to put Russell's teapot on the back burner at 24, falling on my knees to prostrate for Allah with submissive thanks when I was in Miami, sleeping in my car one week, and by the next, by sheer force of will and luck, I had an apartment, cash in my pocket, and a shower that wasn't a Valero sink. And it's not that I forgot everything I said earlier about how I decided calling the police was contrary to my moral compass, but a gun in your face changes a lot of things. As I have recounted many times before when I tell my life story, I moved to Miami after graduating college in 2013 with $1 and a dream. I was dead set on making it even if it meant a month sleeping in a sweltering Nissan Xterra in the back alleys of Wynwood with the windows cracked ever so slightly to not allow too many mosquitoes to terrorize me as I plotted the breakthrough at night. During that first month, I scoured Craigslist for odd jobs or service work and cheap apartments in need of a roommate during the mornings, drove to the beaches and lamped there in the afternoons, found open mic venues in the evening, then rocked a mic late into the night, whenever I could squeeze into a set list, before parking the SUV in a big box parking lot to sleep till the sunrise. That cycle continued until two things happened simultaneously. First, I scored a room in an apartment shared with a Haitian scammer named Omar in a city in Dade whose name masks its menace, North Miami Beach. Doesn't that sound pleasant? Second, I was approached by a producer from Broward who is a South Florida native named Chris Wong, who was the son of the late Chinaman from legendary hip-hop group 2 Live Crew. Before his passing, Chinaman was often spotted occasionally at the open mic hip-hop events in Dade, and his son would tag along too. Chris was only a few years older than me, but shared the passion I had for music. Even though he had a semi-famous father, he was in no better position than me to break into the industry. After we exchanged contacts on a late night after I did a 2-song showcase to a half-empty, half-interested crowd, we clicked tight. I believe we bonded because I was looking for someone who could take me under their wing to help navigate the territory that was unfamiliar to me, which was South Florida, and he was looking for a partner in rhyme as well as crime. See, Chris, despite coming from a stable household with money, was a street nigga. He was the hood DVD man. He had multiple disc burners and laptops in his crib where he ran his piracy operation. He'd burn a few dozen new major motion pictures and pornographic flicks, label them with a Sharpie, load them into the Bible-thick black CD binder he'd tote everywhere, then hop in the whip to post up in front of Walgreens, CVS, or, his favorite, a desolate strip mall somewhere in Dade. Aside from getting chased off the block every now and then by cops and owners of shops, he did aight for himself as his many years of hustling bootlegs had shown him how to stay fed. On any good day, he'd make $100, and on a really good one, $300 to $400, all cash. I believed then, though, as I do now, Chris was emotionally retarded, stunting in his development to maturation, because he'd get giddy on a really good day, then trick half the dough on hookers on Backpage, then return to his duplex where his baby mama greeted him with a kiss and his 6-year-old daughter a hug. I witnessed this pattern of behavior many times firsthand because I'd be posted up with him for hours, shooting the breeze as I saw him peddle CDs with ease, clocking cheese, and accompanied a few excursions putting 304s on knees. I had all the time in the world to observe the game because I was still scraping on savings while looking for a steady gig. However, as the funds began to dwindle, I needed to get some motion and decided to put my own raggedy CD burner that I used to press my mixtapes to work on something that would actually line my pockets. I started small, and Chris even lent me an old folder, a few flicks he knew would sell, and put me onto the site he downloaded. I can't recall if we were still using Tor. I staked my territory a block away from my crib in North Miami Beach, on the corner in front of a Haitian restaurant, where down the block I could see a fast food Subway, and behind me was a narrow street intersected by some alleys. After about 5 hours, I had $50, and I celebrated by eating griot and tostones with pickles at that same Haitian greasy spoon. No hyperbole, but it was the best meal I have ever eaten, despite the salty tears I tasted on the side of my lips because I was starving in more ways than one. I didn't give up on rapping then. Chris and I would work on tracks when he'd throw me a disc of beats and I'd record full songs over them at my makeshift studio. I also didn't give up on finding Square Pay, but applications were sent less frequently when the CD money came easily. However, my hubris and non-humility would not be humored in the hell that was North Miami Beach. After a few weeks, I disregarded the game gave by Chris to never stay out past dark and to shake the spot when your face is hot. I'd be out well past dark under street lights with randos coming up to me hollering, "What you holding, CD man?" It all came to a head when I was out there at about 9 p.m. when a chick I had never seen before came up to me saying her cousin wanted to buy some films. I was starving for a play because I had only made 40 that day, so my better judgment against making a house call, something I had never done, at the behest of a flirtatious foreigner, was going to be done. Before the Americans ask, no, I didn't have a power tool, because I couldn't afford one even if I wanted to, and I never saw Chris carry a piece. So I went along with her walking down the back street of the corner I posted on. After walking and talking for about 10 minutes with the pudgy, curly-haired girl with pockmarked sand-colored skin into the ever-increasing dimness of the alley, I was greeted by a similarly hued hand holding a black pistol pointed at me. Even though my eyes were directed at the barrel, the half-shadowed face was still illuminated by the orange streetlights. I could see over the neck of the gray baggy hoodie. The man pointing the gun at me was only a boy, with gaunt cheekbones, a narrow pointy nose, a clean-shaven symmetrical face like an upside-down triangle, and a buzz cut so low his olive-skinned scalp was exposed under his hair. The jukes happened quickly. He was stern yet overly eager, and I was scared yet calm. He demanded my backpack off me, which only contained my CD booklet and a MacBook charger, plus the cash in my wallet, which totaled only $40. I gave it up. No fuss. I can't remember if he ran away or I did after that, or where the girl went, but I do recall that I was in my bare-bones living room of my newly rented shared flat, making the first call I could to my mom. She was the first person I thought of when I stared down the barrel, and the first person I wanted to know I was okay. I felt bad that I stressed her out, but she was glad I was good. She was the one to suggest I call the police, but I take responsibility for dialing 911. About an hour later, 2 cops called me to come down to their squad car and tell my story. I gave a description and told them what was taken. Of course, they didn't trip about me selling bootleg flicks, which is most likely why I was targeted because the robbers thought I might be evading the law myself. It wasn't until a few months later that I got a call from the Dade County Prosecutor's Office asking me to come in. By that time, I had leveled up by moving out of North Miami Beach to Overtown and was making steady bread legally valeting on South Beach. I went to the top floor of a high-rise government building downtown before starting my afternoon shift. When I entered the office of the prosecutor, I was taken aback by the astounding view of Miami from the window and felt small and poor contrasted to the lanky, tall, well-suited attorney in my old white Air Ones, polo, and jeans. He told me my items weren't recovered, but the perpetrator was caught. He was empathetic and understanding in his tone as we discussed my story. He then said that they had video of the police interrogation and said, I'll never forget this, that the guy started crying. All I could say was wow, and felt like he expected me to be more vengefully celebratory. He then played the video for me of his confession. The video was over 40 minutes long, but he fast-forwarded to the important parts. I found out that the weapon was a BB gun. I found out he was 19. I found out that this was his first robbery. I found out he was facing 7 years. I found out he really did break down in tears. At that point, I knew I was in too deep to take back my part in helping convict this young man. I felt guilty myself for collaborating with white power, embodied in this wasp in his crisp suit sitting behind the desk in front of me. I found out later he ended up taking a plea deal to do 7 years in the Florida penal system. I've often thought about that young man and how his life turned out. All of this took place in 2013 and 2014. Presumably by the time he got out, I had caught my own case, been on and then off probation, traveled the world, got married, got divorced, made money, lost money, quit rapping, and survived a pandemic. Through all of that, he would have been wasting away in a cell, robbed of the opportunity to grow. Maybe prison saved his life, but it most likely didn't. Maybe many people would say I did the right thing, but I feel like I didn't. I'm a snitch, a rat, not because I violated the code of the streets, but because I robbed him of freedom by wielding the weapon of white supremacy in the face of this poor brown soul. I wonder if Young Thug ever broke down behind those walls. I wonder if Gunna feels the same remorse I did. For those that don't know, in 2022, Young Thug, Gunna, and several other members and affiliates of the Young Slime Life crew were arrested in Georgia, charged with violating the state's Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organization Act. RICO was created for and traditionally used against the mafia, so targeting very famous rappers raised quite a few eyebrows in the hip-hop community. The trial is still ongoing, and I won't get into the specifics of the case because the relevant part to my piece is that Thugga is in jail and Gunna isn't. In early 2023, a few months after all of YSL was cuffed, Gunna took an Alfred plea deal, which essentially is him telling the court that he admits YSL was a criminal enterprise, and if the prosecutors demand, he will return to the court and willingly testify. Because of this, Gunna was able to go home, and his partner in slime would have to stay behind. Gunna was instantly labeled a rat by the rap world. Many were aghast that a rapper who claimed he'd never tell on his bros would so quickly give him up to their foes. The event happened in the wake of Tekashi 6ix9ine, a New York drill rapper, snitching to the feds that blood gang members he ran with were also involved in criminality, thus letting him walk free and his day ones getting long sentences. I'd say that the hip-hop community got the rudest wake-up call from Gunna and Tekashi, that the no snitching rhetoric that pervades so much of gangsta rap is insincere. On top of that, it showed that this generation of rappers and rap fans were divorced from street ethics since both artists continued to have successful careers to varying degrees by fans streaming their records and coming to concerts. For the youth, the streets is a myth. But what about the OGs? In 2019, Queenie, wife of legendary rapper Bun B, who's one half of UGK, was the victim of an armed home invasion in which a 20-year-old man stuck a gun in her face after breaking and entering. Luckily, Bun B was home when he heard the commotion, and like a true Texan, he grabbed his gun and began exchanging bullets with the masked intruder. Bun chased the youngin down the street, forced him to unmask, let him leave, then called the police. When the young man was being treated for a bullet wound to the shoulder in a hospital, the cops arrested him and Bun picked him out of a lineup. It would take 5 years for the case to go to trial, but eventually the perpetrator would be sentenced to 40 years in Texas prison with the help of tearful televised testimony from Queenie's husband, Bun B. I refuse to watch it because I don't want to see one of my hip hop idols going out so sad. Frankly, the hip hop community hasn't harshly criticized Bun B as they have Gunna or Tekashi because he's a triple OG, a quinquagenarian. He's been rapping professionally since his early 20s. Respect goes a long way in covering our faults, but I'm sure the 23-year-old Bun would give the 53-year-old Bun the side eye. There, but for the grace of God, the 20-year-old Bun could have easily made a bad move and gotten 40 years in Texas. Of course, Queenie didn't deserve to fear for her life and suffer permanent PTSD, but does helping surrender the life of a young man, especially a young black man, to the authority of one of the most wickedly draconian, racist, unjust states in the Union, that being Texas, mean justice? I couldn't imagine what Queenie and Bun are going through, but I also couldn't imagine what horrors await a young black man in the hell of a Texas cell. To conclude, when I think about Gunna and Bun B's cases, I reserve judgment. I do not think they are necessarily wrong because I'm on the outside looking in and I'm not privy to all their calculations or motivations behind their decisions. All I can say is what I would do and hopefully influence you to take it as universal law as the morally right thing to do. As black people in this world, specifically black people in America, we live under constant injustice. To counteract this, we must subvert, reform, and ultimately dismantle the institutions and forces that reproduce unjust systems and outcomes. That includes moments when we are wronged, even by our own people, because calling on the white supremacists to handle our issues will only reinforce the same system that causes us to suffer disparately. Therefore, we cannot engage in calling the police or testifying in court against our brothers and sisters until we see the abolition of the death penalty, an end to life sentences, mandatory minimum sentencing, solitary confinement, the abolition of bail, an end to the criminal conviction discrimination, an end to disparate conviction sentencing outcomes for non-white people, and an end to the football number sentencing altogether. These are not radical demands. These are sensible ideas. I love my wife with all my heart, but if what happened to Queenie happened to her, I will die fighting to protect her before I call 911. I would never make that mistake again. Nothing is bigger than the P, and the P is the plan. The plan to organize, the plan to galvanize, the plan to militarize, the plan to get free. At least that's the line I'm pushing. Signing out for our people, Simon Hill.